Sahana bhavatu sahanau bhunaktu sahaviryam karavavahai tejasvinavadhitamastu ma vidvishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. May the Lord protect us. May the Lord be pleased with us. May we work together with strength. May we be filled with divine energy. May there be no dislike among us. Peace be unto us and unto all beings. Good morning and welcome to a set of two lectures today. We are very fortunate to have Swami Atmajnanananda from Washington DC come and spend the weekend with us. We had a wonderful time with him last night at the satsang, and I will of course many of you were here last night, so I won't repeat everything that Mr. Nair said, but one important thing is that Swamiji visited us 5 years ago in 2019 and inspired us to start the Ramakrishna Vivekananda Vedanta study circle here in Nashville. So that was also, we started on a Guru Purnima day, so we just celebrated Guru Purnima on Sunday. So it's a very nice coincidence that after at the fifth anniversary of our starting this study circle, Swamiji is back with us. When he first came, he was giving his talk here in the same room. It was cooler that time. Was about the first verse of the Ishavasya Upanishad. Ishavasya vidam sarvam yatkincha jagatyam jagat. So now Swamiji is going to give two lectures today and then two lectures tomorrow. Today's lectures are on the theme of Panchakosha, or the five envelopes that we identify with, drawn from the Taittiriya Upanishad. And we are extremely fortunate to have Swamiji's inspiration and guidance over the past 5 years and to have him in person with us today. Thank you, Swamiji. Thank you.
So again, I thank everybody for the nice invitation, the very warm reception that I've received, and I like to keep things a little bit informal. There'll be time for questions afterwards, but if anybody has anything to ask in the middle, or I say something that needs clarification, don't hesitate. Just stick up your hand and I'll be happy to address any questions that come. This series of talks goes back actually to, and please check your cell phones. Everybody just take a second and make sure they're on silence. It goes back to one of the teachings that we find in the Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna, where he gives the analogy of the onion, peeling the onion and the different sheaths of the onion in order to explain this Panchakosha doctrine. So I personally find a tremendous amount of significance to the fact that he uses this idea of the onion. Basically, this doctrine of Panchakosha, it's a very almost mathematical, sterile type of picture of rings, concentric rings, that seem to be disconnected. Yeah, each one surrounds the next one, and we start with the body and the senses and the mind and go inward and everything. Now, when we look at the onion, we see that it's something organic, it's something interconnected, it's something that grows, and this will bring in not just the metaphysical significance of this Panchakosha doctrine, but the psychological questions and how things develop, and what this tells us about the nature of the individual, even growing up from an infant to an adult. So all different interesting questions come up when we look at it from this point of view. Last night we had a very interesting discussion about models. And a model is something that can be filled in. There are many aspects of it, and a model is also something that's not absolute. So we see Panchakosha doctrine. Does every onion only have 5 layers? And are they easily peeled off? Or some stuck to the others a little more? So we'll see that a lot of interesting factors that come into this whole doctrine. So I want to approach this from a few different points of view, not just this metaphysical model that we have, but also what does it tell us about our spiritual practice? How do we utilize it? We'll see that it's not just a question of analyzing the individual by the self covered by these different sheaths, but by our false identification with them, and how this applies to our meditation, even how do we understand the passage from this life to the next life. All of these things can be analyzed through this one concept, Panchakosha, 5 coverings, 5 sheaths, however we understand it. It's a very brilliant doctrine. We do find the initial reference to it in Taittiriya Upanishad, but the Viveka-Chudamani, to me, is the best exposition of this. I don't know, maybe almost a third of Viveka-Chudamani deals with this. Very detailed and brilliant exposition of this doctrine of the 5 sheaths, 5 koshas. So I'll go through some of these things. The first session will be kind of setting the stage for everything, and then the second session will be the practical aspect of it. How we use this for this vichara we talked about, and how we use it in meditation, and how we understand the other theories. There's another thing we'll find, that there'll be 3 overlapping doctrines. This 5 sheaths will correspond to the 3 bodies. This gross outer physical body, the subtle body, and the causal body. The Sthula Sharira, Sukshma Sharira, and the Karana Sharira. And how that will correspond to the different states of consciousness, waking, dream, and deep sleep. So there'll be a lot of movable parts in all of this. Now I want to start out by reading a quote from the Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna, because one of the most important aspects of this is this idea of peeling off the layers. And if we think of this idea that the self is hidden deep within, and it's covered by these different layers, and if we peel off the different layers, we'll get to that self within. But when we peel off the layers of the onion, we don't find anything inside of it. So it's a very interesting idea. So what do we make of it? Now, Sri Ramakrishna, he uses this in 2 very similar but slightly different ways. One, if we search for this ego, this I, and we pull off all the different layers, we'll find this ego is nothing. It's not there at all. The other, he says, if we search for the I, capital I, in Bengali Ami, then we'll find Tini, we'll find the Lord. We'll find he there or she there. So he uses it in these 2 different ways. Other way is that we find the pure emptiness. Pure emptiness, which is that infinite space, the infinite akasha within the heart. This is the real self. So let me start out with this quote from Sri Ramakrishna. If a person knows his own self, he knows other beings and God. What is my ego? Is it my hand or foot? Flesh or blood, muscles or tendons? Ponder deeply, and you will know that there is no such thing as I. Now, we also talked about this last night. This Sri Ramakrishna's understanding of the ego is very, very sophisticated and very, very subtle, because he understands it as just a sense of who we are, not as a real structure. There's a difference between the Samkhya philosophy, where ahankara is actually one of the structures within antahkara. For Sri Ramakrishna, our sense of ego is constantly changing. It's very much like a modern psychologist's understanding of the ego, the self-image. And based on ideas, it's based on who we think we are. There's nothing really substantial there. If we analyze and we see that it's just an idea. There was a great French philosopher, Jean-Paul Sartre, that was my field of study as an undergraduate. And he wrote a very small treatise called The Transcendence of the Ego. And he said, the ego is an object in the world like any other object. Now, not a physical object, of course, but if we think this Drisha Viveka, that this ego is something that's an object for consciousness. It's an idea that we have. It's nothing but an idea. The idea of who we think we are at any given time, which is always changing. So if we look for this real ego, we won't find it. And then he says, we turn our backs for a second and it shows up again. So we have to utilize it and use this right ego. Anyway, so let me not get too carried away with this. As you peel off the skin of an onion, you find it consists only of skin. You could not find any kernel in it. So on analyzing the ego, it will be found that there's no real entity that you can call I. So now, from the very highest Advaita Vedanta, you eliminate this ego sense I, we're left with pure consciousness. It's very brilliant. At the same time, he's very practical. He'll say, but there's no way to get rid of it. You chop down this huge Ejwata tree, this huge banyan tree, very next day sprouts will come up again. So there's no real entity that you can call I. Such an analysis of the ego convinces one that the ultimate substance is God alone. When egoism drops away, divinity manifests itself. So we have this identification of emptiness with fullness. That is empty. There's nothing, when we peel away everything, there's that empty space, but that empty space is infinite. Now we have the infinite space. Now, if it's really infinite, even when it's covered by everything, it's infinite. There's no way to limit this akasha, infinite space. And so that self within, it's only our false identification with the coverings that makes us feel limited. And this other beautiful idea, we don't search for God any place outside of ourselves. God is that ultimate reality dwelling within the heart. And we fail to see it because it's too close to us. Actually, it's the observer of us. Actually, it's the real self. Yeah. And the real self is always looking outside of itself. This is the play of Maya, we can see. So let me read this again. Such analysis of the ego convinces one that the ultimate substance is God alone. When egotism drops away, divinity manifests itself. And then again, if one analyzes oneself, one doesn't find any such thing as I. Take an onion, for instance. First of all, you peel off the red outer skin, then you find thick white skins. Peel these off one after another, and you won't find anything inside. So we can say, even for the Buddhist tradition, they can prove their shunyavada with this. That's because the real nature of consciousness is emptiness. But it's not abhava. This is that very important distinction. It is not a zero, but there's nothing within it. Perfectly clear. Again, this Sartre, he says consciousness, it's like a clear breeze flowing out towards objects. They're very pure and with no human source. This is why we call it something divine. So why did Sri Ramakrishna use this illustration of the onion? And to me, it's the organic nature of it. It's how it grows. Do we have any biologists here? Okay. How does an onion grow? Does it go from the outside in or from the inside out with the different sheaths?
Ego is not a thing, it's the actions.
I'm talking about onions now. I'm not talking about ego. I'm talking about onions.
From the inside. On the inside.
From the inside. So this hard outer shell comes later.
Yeah.
Oh.
It starts out with the, and then they grow into other things.
Yeah, so they grow up, but the green one comes in the very cold form.
Okay.
Comes up.
Okay. Anyhow, when we cut an onion, we see that the outside is a little hard and brittle and a darker color, brown or purple or something like that. Yeah. So this will be the Annamayakosha. So we'll have different terms for these things. Anna, of course, means food, but Annamaya, his body is made up of food. It's nourished by food. It's really converted food turns into this physical body. So this Annamaya kosha, this will be the outer layer. Now, the analogy isn't perfect because we start out with the physical body. So we can say that this onion will start from the outside and go inward a little bit, but it's complicated. We'll see all of that. So we start out with this outer shell, this Annamaya kosha, and then inside of that, these are all concentric circles, but anyhow, inside of that we'll have Pranamaya kosha, then Manomaya kosha, Vijnanamaya kosha, Anandamaya kosha. We'll go through all of these one by one. But one of the important parts of every analogy is the secondary function of the analogy. So rather than just use concentric circles, which would explain everything, normally it's explained that way, the secondary element is the organic, growing, changing nature of it. We have many examples of this. This Vivartavada, a very classic example of the snake in the rope that we see in the twilight, barely visible. We see something lying on the ground, we think it's a snake, and we go up closer and we find out it's a rope. Now, why is it a snake in a rope? Could be anything. Because the secondary aspect is when we understand the nature of reality, fear will disappear. We're using an illustration that naturally we think we see a snake, we'll be afraid of it. So we'll back away from it, then slowly we'll see and we'll analyze it. So sometimes secondary aspect is more important than the primary aspect. That we realize the true nature of the self, fear will vanish. True nature of the Brahman is fear will vanish. So we have the secondary meaning with this onion idea that we don't start out with everything fully formed. We may assume with this Panchakosha doctrine that every individual comes fully formed with all of the different koshas. But we'll see that they grow and they develop into each other. We start out with one, and it'll develop and grow. And so there's a very important aspect of this, and it'll bring, as I say, this developmental element to this, and the psychological element to this, and many things that we often don't think about. Today's talk will be a little bit, outside of the realm of very traditional analysis of Panchakosha. Panchakosha doctrine is usually a very pristine type of thing. Everything is separate and everything fits inside and everything works out perfectly. But models aren't like that. We know that. So we'll learn a lot about formation of the personality of the individual, how we go even from the fetus in the womb till we go to be an adult person. We'll be able to understand the distinction between children and adults, the distinction between even plants and animal life and human life, in terms of the development of these different koshas, mostly Manomaya kosha and Vijnanamaya kosha. Yeah. So these will turn out to be very useful tools. Okay, so we looked at, again, we're going to have to somehow connect these to this idea of the three bodies, sharira. Because this will also bring us back to this idea of the different states of consciousness, which is very helpful for this analysis of the true nature of the self. What is that self? that is equally present in the dream state, in the waking state, in the dreamless sleep state, and in the transcended state of samadhi. So, one footnote before we begin. This goes back to the idea of models. That in philosophical circles, and I would say particularly in Indian thought, there's a great deal of emphasis on categories. And sometimes I think we make a mistake in thinking that these are absolute categories. Let me give one example. In Sankhya, we have this doctrine of this Antakarana. Antakarana really means the mind in all of its fullness, but it's broken down into four different categories, we can say, that will have the manas, the mind, will have buddhi, the intellect, will have chitta, we can say memory. Chitta also means the mind stuff. We can say memory, and then ahankara, and then there's I. Now, could it have been more than four? Or there are different functions of the mind? Could we add imagination? Could we add the dreaming? Well, yeah, of course. There's nothing absolute about this type of designation. Now, the same thing with Panchakosha doctrine. I would have been very happy if they had a Indriya Kosha, Indriya Maya Kosha for the senses. We said we have this Pranamaya Kosha. So there's nothing perfectly absolute. Manomaya Kosha, Vijnanamaya Kosha, both belong to mind, really. Just different functions. So these are helpful types of distinctions, but I don't take them to be absolute distinctions. Now, I'll say something a little bit blasphemous even. 3 gunas. Could there have been 4 gunas? Could there have been 5 gunas? Do we only break things down into sattva, rajas, and tamas? We can imagine a very good, helpful, useful doctrine that analyzes things in a different way. But that's a very brilliant way of doing it. This is not to denigrate that in any way. These are all helpful things. So we'll find with this Panchakosha doctrine also that there'll be a lot of overlap. So when we go from Annamaya Kosha to Pranamaya Kosha. Now, where do we put this Pranamaya Kosha if we want to connect it with this physical body, Stula Sharira, and the subtle body, Sukshma Sharira, or causal body, Karana Sharira? Prana. Some will say it belongs to the body. We find, but is there no prana working in the mind? No. So this will be that layer of the onion that's a little bit not so easy to peel off, connected with both the outer one and the inner one, and could go in either direction. Really, if we want to say this Stula Sharira is a combination of the 2 outer ones, we can do it. If we want to say that it belongs to the subtle body, we can do it, because there's prana throughout. Even in this Anandamaya Kosha, if there's any function at all, there's prana. They're very subtle type and everything. So anyhow, the second one is Pranamaya Kosha. We can say that this also can include the senses, so the indriyas. So we have Annamaya Kosha, the physical body, and then within that somehow, if we can picture a diagram, within that somehow will be this Pranamaya Kosha. So this prana will be there, and then Manomaya Kosha, inside of that is mind, and then inside of that, now the reason why it's inside, because we can peel the outer ones off without it affecting the inner ones. Now there's a reason for that. Then there's Vijnanamaya Kosha. Now what's the difference between Manomaya Kosha and Vijnanamaya Kosha? Same difference that we find between manas and buddhi. And the only difference there is function. How does the mind function? With this with the mind, manas. This is what sorts things out. This is, we take things into the senses, and we can recognize things, and we can place them in categories, and everything will make a little sense to us. But this buddhi, this is what can determine things and make decisions and decide what action to take. So it belongs to the same, really same faculty of mind. It all belongs to mind, but it's a different type of functioning, a different type of development of mind. Now, can we have Manomaya Kosha without Vijnanamaya Kosha? Yeah. We have many people that completely lack the power of discrimination and completely lack the power of self-analysis, Mostly we think for children, or in the animal kingdom. That this sense of I, and now we'll get to that later. This is a very, very important idea. The sense of I, this ego sense, according to Shankaracharya, belongs to this Vijnanamaya kosha. It emerges from that. Anyhow, I don't want to get too much ahead of ourselves. So this Pranamaya kosha, this second one, I don't see that it fits in very easily into any particular category, because prana means energy. Prana means life. And there's life in this physical body, but this energy also belongs to mind. So that will be a little bit this sheath of the onion that is connected. Some of them, you cut an onion, some are easier to pull apart, and some have a little membrane connecting them. People who cook a lot, and see, I like cooking. And whenever I cut an onion, I think of this doctrine and try to analyze, try to figure how one grew out of the other, and what is the relationship, and why some are harder to peel away from the other. So we'll find that, especially with this pranamaya kosha, that it belongs to this physical body from one point of view, and this subtle body from the other point of view. So this manomaya kosha, this is again very much connected with pranamaya kosha, with the indriyas, with the senses. What the mind does with regard to perception, things come in through the sense organs, and we have to be able to recognize them, and we have to be able to place them in different categories. We have to be able to identify things. Without this manomaya kosha, everything is kind of a blur. We have no power to separate one thing from another. So this functioning of the mind is something that's very, very important, and it's developed in different ways among different species. Now, if we take the animal kingdom, who has a more highly developed mind with regard to the sense of smell than a dog, a bloodhound? They can recognize hundreds of different smells. You give them a piece of cloth that somebody was wearing, and they can follow that person for hundreds of miles. They have the ability to distinguish things that we don't have. So from that point of view, this manomaya kosha in the animal will be more highly developed than it is with us. Vijnanamaya kosha may be absent. They may have no idea that, oh, this belongs to that person, I'm supposed to follow him, let me go that way. They won't have that power to, it may be more of an instinctive type of thing. But this mind has the ability to do and this mind develops over time. It's not something that we're born with a fully developed mind, just like we're not born with a fully developed body. All of these things, that's why I like this onion idea. It's organic, it's growing. It doesn't start out fully developed. So, this is that manomaya kosha. Then this vijnanamaya kosha. This is the sheath of the intellect. As I was saying, that there's not a very strong distinction that in very ordinary understanding will say that this is just the mind. And there are different functions of the mind. When the mind is functioning in a certain way, we say this is the intellect at work. Another way we say that this is what we call manas. Now, the mind also doesn't need to take in external things. The mind can think. So there's that process of thought belongs to the mind. Process of feeling. There's emotions. We sometimes make a distinction between mind and heart. That we feel things in the heart. We feel things in the mind. There's nothing. We feel it in a different way, of course. It doesn't have to be cognitive. We don't have to analyze it all the time. It'll be a deeper feeling, but everything takes place in the mind. Even bondage and even liberation take place in the mind. We have some beautiful verses about that. But anyhow, so this is how this manas works with regard to external things, with regard to internal things also. But this vijnanamaya kosha, I'll save this a little bit because this is so important. This Vijnana Kosha is that ability to reflect, to have some sense of who we are, to really feel that we're individuals. Now, do animals have this? Anybody?
Yes,
A little bit.
they do.
Yeah, see, this is a continuum. This is not, there's nothing black and white about this. The dogs have the capacity to show love and to have loyalty and everything. I think better than we do sometimes. Yeah. Do any animals have the sense of I? Yes, we've done these experiments, especially with chimpanzees and gorillas and things. What was her name? Diane somebody, huh?
Diane Fisher.
Les?
Diane Fisher, I think.
Not Fisher. Fossey, something like that, yeah. That, yeah, they can recognize themselves in a mirror, sometimes these chimpanzees, so they have some sense of I. Now, we don't know exactly what it feels like to be a chimpanzee or anything, but all of these are developmental things. And the difference between children and adults is this sense of I and sense of responsibility. This is why we have different sets of laws for children and adults. This juvenile, you know, if you shoot somebody, kill somebody, and you're below a certain age, there's a different standard for how you're going to be judged. Because this Vijnana Kosha, it has to develop to a certain point where we can be a little bit insightful and understand the ramifications of our actions and different things like that. Then we get to this Anandamaya Kosha. This is the innermost one. This corresponds to the Karana Sharira, which is something like the subconscious mind. And this is very, very important for us to understand where these samskaras, where these tendencies and these vasanas, these desires, where they dwell. And if we try to analyze, why do certain thoughts come into the mind? Where do they come from? They're hidden deep within the psyche. This is Anandamaya Kosha, but this also corresponds to this Karana Sharira. So this repository of all of our past memory, past everything. And when we go into deep sleep, they lie hidden there. They remain. They don't disappear. But it's called Anandamaya Kosha because this is the closest sheath to the self. And when we analyze the onion, that the outer ones are a little harder, and the light doesn't shine through as much. I hope this is right. Anyhow, for our point of view, let's suppose. And the inner one is very translucent. The light of the self can shine through that more easily. And all spiritual experience, higher type of spiritual experience, short of Nirvikalpa Samadhi, will take place in this Anandamaya Kosha. So that's why sheath of bliss. And when we analyze the state of deep dreamless sleep, there's a very famous kind of commentary on this. Sukhamaham swapsam na kincheda vedisham. I slept very peacefully, happily. I didn't know anything. Yeah. So some sense when we wake up from dreamless sleep that there's still some awareness there. Self is observing that state, and it's a peaceful type of state. But it's also characterized by tamas, by darkness, because it's still, we don't have that highest realization of the self. Yeah. Because the self-awareness is not there. But some type of feeling of bliss. So, these are the 5 different sheaths. And I'll go through some of these in a little more detail. That we see that we start out life with 2 of these. Annamaya Kosha, Pranamaya Kosha. These 2 are present even before the formation of the fetus. If we think biologically that there's a living cell from the mother, from the future mother. The living cell is something physical. That seed will grow into, it'll multiply and grow into the fetus, into a person. And there's life, there's prana. So these are there from the very beginning. Now, we have these theological questions about when does life begin and conception and all of these things. This is a different question. This has nothing to do. That's really a theological idea. When does the soul enter into the body? It's a little bit outside of this Vedantic type of thinking. But there has to be life there, and this is the seed that will grow into this Annamaya Kosha, Pranamaya Kosha. So these two things have to be there. Now, what about these samskaras, all of these things? So there has to be some type of Anandamaya Kosha, causal body, because we're not born as a blank slate. That as soon as the mind develops, we realize that it was carrying earlier some samskaras from the previous existence, or even the experience in the womb. We don't know what that's like. It's some very vague type of thing, but so there'll be a little bit of that. But the manomaya, the mind is very, very much undeveloped at all. Now, if there's any development of the mind, then it'll be, well, how do we compare it to different animal species that have a very undeveloped type of mind, but we have some feeling that they can sense things and everything. And what about the pranamaya kosha in terms of the senses? Yeah, this is the process that takes place before the child is born, that one by one the senses will start to develop, physical senses. One by one. I don't know the exact order or anything, but we have a belief, many people believe, that the sense of hearing is present in the womb. And it's very fashionable now for, I don't know, the last 20, 30, 40 years, and earlier also, that people will play music for the fetus in the womb. I remember with my sister, they had this Beethoven for babies and things like that. Yeah. And there's a very famous story of this queen, Mandalasa, who, while she's carrying one by one different sons, that she would chant, recite to them, Niranjanastvam, Tattvamasi, you are that, you're the pure, perfect one. And when they were born, as soon as they were old enough, the memory awakened and they renounced the world. There's some story like that. So, again, there's nothing black and white or hard dividing line between these different states. The difference between the fetus the day before it's born and the day after it's born is not much. How much will it be in terms of development? No. Only now it's present to the outside world, and it'll start being able to feed itself, or to be fed, without the umbilical cord. Otherwise, it's not too much difference at all. So, we have these two sheaths from the very beginning. Pranamaya kosha, manomaya kosha, and then a little bit we have to try to understand how somehow, once the mind develops, and the mind will be developed a tiny bit. Now, all of this depends on the development of our nervous system also. If we want to be scientific about it, then to what extent the brain is developing also. Will there be some type of mind that's functioning? And it'll be functioning in a way that doesn't allow us to sort things out, but can have some sensation. We don't think that the fetus has no sensation whatsoever, but to what extent it has it, these are things that are debated by many people. This gets into, of course, I don't want to touch this abortion issue or anything, but these are the types of questions that people can ask. So we start to see that these different sheaths will begin to develop. They'll start developing together, the senses and the mind. Now this Vijnanamaya kosha, this won't come until we're more or less adults. And the curious thing about the mind is that at the very early stages of development, we're not aware of it. Everything just comes from outside. If we try to imagine, what is the perception of the newborn? What is the perception of the newborn? Now, from one point of view, we can say this is the only time in our lives when we have a pure perception. Pure perception without overlaying any concept or any type of bias or prejudice or anything. But what is that pure perception? Colors and shapes. We won't see things, objects, or anything like that. There was a very interesting documentary done some years ago. I think it was simply called The Brain. And it was about a man who had been born blind. He was a fully functioning person. He had a wife and children, a job and everything. And when he was maybe in his 40s, something like that, they somehow developed a way to cure his blindness. Maybe some type of artificial eye, something like that. And they thought, oh, it'll be so wonderful for him. He'll see the face of his wife and his children, and it'll be just a glorious thing for him. Everyone was so excited. He was excited. So they performed this operation, and he didn't see anything. It was just a blur, a mass of colors and shapes. He didn't see objects. He didn't see people. He couldn't recognize anything, because this is a developmental process that takes place from birth. And it took years. Ultimately, he did it. He had to compress in a few years what we get from our very childhood, so that he could learn to see and recognize. Oh, yes, this is my wife. Otherwise, I see a nose and two eyes, same as I see with everybody else. So these are all learned things, and this is the function of the mind. And it's a good thing and it's a bad thing. It's a bad thing because this is how we learn prejudice. That we start to identify with certain types of behavior, which is not common to all people of that class, but then we attribute it to everybody. This is called prejudice or a bias. On the other hand, it enables us not to have to reinvent the wheel every time. We recognize things. We know people. We can live in this world. So it's extremely important. So this is the development of the senses. Once we're born, the senses are fairly well developed. We say they're not developed because the mind is not developed. See, Swamiji, he makes a very big point. When we talk about indriyas, the senses, we're not simply talking about these physical senses. We're talking about the optic nerve and other things, and that portion of the brain and the mind, which can receive these and understand and recognize and everything. So this, once we're born, now we start to get the development of this manomaya kosha, and ultimately of this vijnanamaya kosha. So these is part of that organic functioning that we have. You know, there's even one theory, which I think is fairly well accepted, that the growth of the fetus in the womb mirrors the evolutionary process that we have from the very beginning of creation, where we start with animals, with fish, and then they come on land, even to the point where the fetus has gills at one point and loses them. So there's something to this idea. It's also interesting to note this Dashavatara theory, that also the 10 avatars, it also starts with the fish in the water and then the tortoise coming out on the land, and this evolutionary process. How they came up with that is something very interesting and very fascinating. Okay, now we'll get to this Vijnanamaya kosha. And how was our time here? Okay, yeah. So this to me is the most important and most interesting. And I want to get back to this Sankhya doctrine that ahankara, this I, is just some structure within consciousness. structure within consciousness. We have memory, or functioning. We have memory. We have this capacity to perceive things, this capacity to identify, and all these different things. And this sense of I is something that just belongs to the mind. That it's not so much a developmental thing. Now, with Shankaracharya, this Panchakosha doctrine, we find that this is the result of the mind developing the capacity of self-reflection. So, what is this sense of I that we have as a small child? Practically nothing. Practically nothing. That small child has very little sense of itself, very little sense of itself as a thinking being. I'll tell you an interesting story. I was having a conversation with one of my nieces at one time. She was very young. I don't remember how old she was, maybe 6, 7, something like that. I don't remember. And we had a friend who had a child who had some type of developmental issue, that his behavior was very odd. She could recognize that his cognitive age would have been like a small child, something like that. So she asked me that, well, why was he like that? So I thought I was very intelligent. I'll give a very good intelligent answer, that sometimes we get a disease in the body and we're affected by that disease. He has some type of disease, something like that, in the mind. So she looked at me and she said, "What's the mind?" And I was kind of shocked that she had no conception that there's something called mind, because there was no self-reflection at that age. She was too young to think back, to even know, do I have thoughts? We have thoughts, but do we know that we have thoughts? This is a Vijnanamaya kosha, this is ability to reflect on things. So this Vijnanamaya kosha is responsible for the emergence of the sense of I. And we get this from this Viveka Chudamani, a very brilliant type of thing, that he doesn't, Shankaracharya, who pays great respect to Sankhya philosophy. It's not that he's saying that we should forget about all of that, but there's a very subtle type of understanding that the sense of I is something that develops over time, that it can change, that it involves a little self-reflection, and it involves a little maturity, that we have to reach a certain type of age before we will get to this. So we see that this will be the difference between different types of people, what sense of I they have, and between children and adults. And I was saying, even within the animal kingdom, they may have a sense of I that we don't know about at all. But for the most part, we assume that at least with lower animals, that this is vacant there. That means their onion hasn't developed this sheath. Or this Manomaya kosha is the one that the Vijnanamaya kosha will grow out of that one. And it just remains kind of one block there. So, we can see how the mind can be highly developed in an animal, but it won't have this Vijnanamaya kosha at all. And with certain individuals, they're also completely clueless with regard to themselves, how they appear to other people. They have a sense of I that doesn't correspond at all to somebody else's sense of them. So this is all to what extent, how much subtlety is there in this Vijnanamaya kosha. Very self-aware people will have a very highly developed Vijnanamaya kosha. So, this, let me just read this one verse from Viveka Chudamani, because it's very, very important. I'd like this. Anadi kalo yam aham swabhavo jiva samasta vyavahara vodha karoti karmanyapi purva vasana punya punyani cha tat phalani. So, here, this Vijnanamaya kosha, anadi kalo yam aham jiva is identified with the jiva. Now, what is the jiva? Very, just in the most common sense way of understanding it, is the person, me. I am the jiva. If you ask, who am I? And I tell you, who am I? Who am I? I belong to the Ramakrishna order. I grew up in a certain place, that my parents are so-and-so, that I have this education. That's who I am. This is from a very ordinary point of view. Highest point of view, of course, I am the self. Yeah. But the ordinary point of view, this is who I am. This is jiva, sense of myself as a person. This sense of personhood belongs to the Vijnanamaya Kosha. It emerges out of the Vijnanamaya Kosha. So, our sense of being an individual person is accounted for by the sheath of the intellect, or identification with the intellect. Now, we'll get to all of this in the afternoon session, that it's not just that we're covered by all of these, it's what we identify with. And this will bring come to the forefront this very almost paradoxical idea that we're not simply peeling away all of these coverings, but the Vijnanamaya Kosha, Manomaya Kosha, Vijnanamaya Kosha, everything is a question of what do they identify with, and how can they're the ones peeling everything off. So the mind itself has to peel off all of these different layers, including the mind. It's paradox. But how do I do this vichara? How do I analyze? I'm not the mind. I say I'm not the mind. Who's analyzing that? The mind. It can't be done by anything else. It's not consciousness that's doing it. Consciousness is only shedding the light on the mind, allowing the mind to function. So this Vijnanamaya Kosha will turn out to be the key. This is what keeps us in bondage when the sense of I is identified with the outer sheaths. This is what will free us when that sense of I is identified with the self within. So I want to stop here, give some time for questions if we have. This is just to lay out the whole thing. Now we see that we have beautiful analysis. I think this is one of the most helpful ways of understanding of this human personality, who we are as individuals, and we can understand why we have concentric sheaths. Because we'll see that when we go to sleep, we've peeled off this physical body. Everything within remains. When the mind becomes still and quiet, then this Anandamaya Kosha still remains. They remain untouched. Just we peel an onion, that each outer cell, it doesn't touch any of the individual ones. Everything remains that way. So it's a metaphysical model for the nature of the self. The self seems to dwell within. When everything is removed, there's no within or without. It's infinite space. And there's no I there. The Jnana Kosha, when that goes, there's no I there. Is the self an I? Or is the self a he or a she? Is the self that? This is what Sri Ramakrishna says, is beyond mind and speech. What Brahman is nature, that it's between this I and the he, between the tat and the tvam. It's something that can't be limited to one or the other, and beyond mind and speech. So now we have a basis for removing these sheaths through vichara, removing these sheaths through meditation, removing these sheaths through the different states of consciousness, and removing these sheaths when we leave this body even. That'll be the subject for the afternoon. I'll go through those kind of different ways of looking at this. Okay, now we have time for some discussion and questions. So,
Swamiji, so if I understood correctly, the first four koshas, Annamaya, Pranamaya, and Manomaya, and Vijnanamaya, they are subject to development. They are subjected to development, whereas the Anandamaya is not affected by development. Is that what you are saying?
This is a very, very good question, and something that I should have mentioned earlier. Every waking moment, we're adding to the store of the unconscious. Every waking moment. So what we have is memory that can be brought back. Hidden memories can be brought back. There'll be memories that can't be brought back that still affect us. And there'll be things that we bring into this life that we won't have access to at all. And then there'll be rare souls who can remember all of these things. So right now there are many things that happen in our lifetime that we don't remember and that can be brought back to memory. Somebody can remind us. Oh, you remember when you were young and this happened and everything. Say, oh yeah, now I remember. Where was that memory? That was in this Anandamaya, or this, we can say Karana Shurya. It's a little better to understand it in terms of this subconscious, unconscious. But we may be born with a certain talent, a certain skill, with certain temperamental aspects to our personality that we can't trace back to anything, but had a cause. It's not by sheer chance. And this we'll understand in terms of these samskaras, the things that we experienced in a previous lifetime that we bring with us. Now, in the waking state, every experience that we have leaves a mark. So just as samskaras, we're not simply a bundle of past samskaras. Every moment we're creating them. That every experience that we have shapes our personality. See, the karma theory, it has a psychological side and a metaphysical side. Metaphysical side is that we do something now, we may pay for it later in the next lifetime. This is very hard to track exactly how this works. Psychological side is very easy for us to understand. We're affected by everything. Yeah. Yata shrutam, yata karma. Whatever we do and whatever we hear, whatever we experience, it leaves a mark on this. And it doesn't have to remain in our active memory in order to affect the way we think and live in the world. Where is it stored? In this Karana Sharira, which is identified with this Anandamaya Kosha. We say Anandamaya Kosha because it'll be more connected with this blissful feeling in dreamless sleep. But they correspond to each other. So it doesn't really develop, but it gets added to. Yeah. The faculty of the subconscious doesn't really change too much. Now, we may say that the type of experience that we have as a very small child will be different because we can't analyze it. We don't know exactly what's happening, but it can leave a mark. It can still leave a mark. You know, I have this funny feeling that the earliest memory that I have is of a dream that I had. Yeah, because I'm pretty sure it happened in the old house before we moved. It was a very, we can say a nightmare that was trying to climb up the hill and it was sand and I kept falling down. Somehow I remember that. It left a deep impression, whereas I don't remember anything about the house that we lived in before then or anything like that. So, why and how certain things leave an impression on the mind is very, very hard to say. We don't have good, very clear answers about this. Now we're into the psychology of it a little bit more. But this idea of samskaras, the ones that come from a previous lifetime, don't have to be in the form of memories. And most of the time we won't remember any of these things. But why are we born with a certain type of personality? That maybe siblings are quite different. We grow up with the same parents and it's basically the same environment. Why is there a difference from one child to another child? And as we grow up also. So we know that what we bring into this world plays an effect. We know that our experiences after that. Now, which is more important? This, of course, is a highly debated topic. Is it the natural tendencies of the mind, or is it what we're taught when we grow up? There are theories that the first 5 years of life, or when we learn just about everything, when our personality is formed. And this child psychology is a very important type of thing. How we can shape the characteristics and qualities and values of children when they're very, very young, that will last for a whole lifetime. So these are very, very important. There was a book that somebody wrote, it was half tongue-in-cheek. Everything I learned in life, I learned in kindergarten, something like that. Yeah, that learn to share with friends, learn to take a nap after lunch, little funny things like that, but there's a great truth behind it. Yeah, so on the one hand, it doesn't develop, it keeps getting added to, but also because our experiences change. And things may not be so traumatic when we get older. At certainly age, certain things happen to us, and it can be highly traumatic. When we get a little bit older, we can roll with the punches a little better. So that means that the effect of it may not be so strong. And the memory of it will be there. It won't get hidden in our subconscious or unconscious mind to the extent that things can when we're very young.
So it can be
Okay.
added to, but can it also be subtracted from?
Okay. These are brilliant questions. What do we do with these samskaras? Yes, because one of the most important aspects of spiritual life is the self-development. Is how do we redefine ourselves? How do we get rid of these old bad habits that we have and everything? So, we have certain tendencies that we can recognize as very harmful for us. We can recognize aspects of our personality that we don't like, that we wish we were different types of people, and we can work on them, and we can change them to a certain extent. So there'll be certain things that, say someone is very shy, and a great fear of public speaking. We know that they can go to these Toastmasters, the other courses, and sometimes become very accomplished public speakers. Then there'll be others that shyness is so deeply ingrained that they'll never be good public speakers. So the question of how deep these samskaras are. And so, Sri Ramakrishna, he gives us beautiful advice about these different things. And also in Gita, this is very important, some of the teachings in Gita with regard to this question. In Gita, we don't find this concept of samskara analyzed per se, but more this term that's used, swabhava. Swabhava in Gita, it doesn't mean one's real nature. Generally, swabhava, we would say, swabhava means one's nature as an individual. So very often it's used with regard to Arjuna himself. What is his swabhava? He's a kshatriya. That means he has a warrior nature that is not going to change. So there'll be some types of samskaras that are so deeply ingrained that we may say represent almost an unchangeable element of our personality that we accept and you utilize it somehow. This is what Swami Vivekananda calls taking the path of least resistance. And instead of Arjuna, what did he wanted to do? He wanted to give up his job as a warrior, and he said, "Better I'll beg my food. I'll be like a wandering mendicant." And Sri Krishna, he's giving all sorts of arguments why you won't do it, but then he says, your nature won't allow you to do it. Yeah, it won't allow it. Yeah. So we have this one idea. Prakritim yanti bhutani nigraha kim karishyati. The very important, there's some beautiful verses there that say that, prakriti here means swabhava, that we have a particular nature. And for Sri Ramakrishna, he'll use this distinction with regard to, are we essentially bhaktas or are we essentially jnanis? So he'll say some are born with an element of Shiva. They'll take this path of Jnana Yoga. Some are born with an element of Vishnu. They'll be happier with the Bhakti Yoga. He said that some people, just accept it. Just accept it. That, yes, deep down, that this is really the direction that my heart is taking me. Don't force something that won't work. We have a very good example with this Vijay Krishna Goswami. He was a member of the Brahmo Samaj, very close friend and associate with Keshav Chandra Sen. They had a split at one point, but this Brahmo Samaj was a very watered down devotional type of path without any real ecstatic type of devotion. Didn't allow any idea of personal God with form. Didn't allow going into a temple. Didn't allow the personal God in the form of any of the deities that we have, Krishna, Rama, all of that. It was a very sterile type of Western influence type of devotional path. This Vijay Krishna Goswami was born, Goswami, if you know, in the Bengali Goswamis, they trace themselves back to the Chaitanya tradition, a highly devotional, emotional type of tradition. So Sri Ramakrishna used to say to the Vidya, look, you have the blood of a bhakta within you, that it's going to come out sooner or later. He was trying to force himself into this very sterile type of devotional tradition, half devotional, half jnani tradition. And ultimately he had to leave. And he became a very highly acclaimed saintly figure, Vijay Krishna Goswami, with many, many disciples. Yeah, and reaches a high stage through this ecstatic type of devotion, the singing and dancing and kirtan and everything. So Sri Ramakrishna recognized that, just as Sri Krishna recognized with Arjuna, that no, deep down in your heart, you're a warrior. No matter what you say, that's going to come out. That's going to make you act that way. So we have to analyze ourselves and see what things we want to change, what things we can change, things that we can't change, how can we utilize them. For Sri Ramakrishna, this Kama, Krodha, Lobha, all of these different passions, he says that these are something common to every human being. We can try as hard as we can, some elements of these will remain. So he says, utilize them. He says, more feryadao. He gives the example, you spin it around so it faces the other direction. Yeah. Turn it in the other direction. So whatever passions we have, be passionate for God. Utilize these things. That be feeling of frustration and anger if anything stands in our way. We want to go to the temple, family's pulling. No, birthday party, there's this, there's that. We feel a little frustrated. It's good. Good, feel a little frustrated. That means you have this other high priority. So some things we can change, and some things we have to utilize. There's this prayer, the serenity prayer. Yes. Do you know the serenity prayer? How does it go?
Lord, give me the courage to change the things I can.
No,
the patience to
to understand what to accept
that
what
I cannot change,
Yeah.
and then the wisdom to know the difference.
And the wisdom to know the difference, to be able to change the things I can change, and to recognize the things I can't change, something like that, to accept them. So yeah, it's a very brilliant, beautiful prayer. I never remember the words exactly, but yeah. Now, what do we do with these samskaras that we recognize that, yeah, we can change them, but it'll take a lot of hard work. So, we have different ways of approaching this. One, if we have weeds, we simply don't water them. They'll die on their own. Now, this is what Sri Ramakrishna says, that anything that will awaken these different feelings that we have, suppose it's anger, suppose it's lust, whatever it is, that we remove ourselves from that environment. A very simple, obvious thing. Those who have some type of addiction, alcoholism problem. If some people say, no, it's just I'm not really getting over it if I just avoid people and I don't go to bars and this and that desire is still there. But AA is very intelligent. It says no, that don't constantly put yourself in temptation for these things. Don't try to be a big hero. Remove yourselves. So Sri Ramakrishna says, when the plant is just planted, that we have to put a little hedge around it, put a little fence around it, otherwise it'll get eaten up. It's, in India, these cows and goats, they'll come and they'll just chomp on everything. So we have to hedge it around in the beginning. So we have to protect ourselves, well, whatever that problem is, that we remove ourselves from that type of environment. Now, Sri Ramakrishna gives more emphasis to this other tactic, we can say. That something negative is pulling us in one direction. Don't try to fight it. Go in the other direction. Replace it. So the replacement theory. Yeah. So if we feel that there's some type of pull for some type of sense, pleasure, and enjoyment, and that we find that if we can develop a greater love for holy company, then this whatever pull we have for worldly company will automatically become less. So the very positive way of looking at things, we just go in this positive direction, let ourselves be pulled. Now in spiritual life, we have to have the conviction that that which is pulling us in spiritual life from one side is much greater than that which is pulling us to worldly life from the other side. That one is a huge magnet and the other is a small magnet. But we're too close to the other one. This is our problem. That if we have to start walking away from the other one, the closer we get to this huge magnet, the more we'll feel the joy, the more we'll be pulled in. Again, Gita and Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna are companion books. They explain each other so beautifully. We have this idea of sattvic happiness. And the sattvic happiness is not something that we automatically in the beginning can appreciate. It's a learned taste. In the beginning it may taste bitter. Vishamila, it may taste like poison even. But at the end, amrita, it will taste like nectar. We have to keep feeding ourselves these positive things and recognize that what we're giving up is something very small, what we're getting is something very great. So this is that replacement idea that whatever is pulling us in the other direction, don't fight it too much. Replace it with something higher. The very nice statement that was made by one of the early Swamis of Baroda. I know it from Swami Virajanandaji, but maybe others also said it. One devotee said to him, "Oh Maharaj, your renunciation is so great. We have no feeling, no sense of renunciation. Vairagya, how tremendous it is." And he said, "Why do you say that my renunciation is so great? What have I given up? I've given up this little small mud puddle of the world, and what have I gotten? I've gotten God. Your renunciation is far greater. You've given up God for this little mud puddle of the world. So you're the ones who have renounced something great. I haven't renounced anything great at all." So this is very important for us to analyze these samskaras, that likes and dislikes, all of these things represent bondage for us. And if we can learn to transcend these things, see, this idea of freedom, moksha, this freedom doesn't simply mean that we won't be reborn, that we'll merge in God, nothing. I mean, that's of course one meaning, but bondage is bondage to these samskaras. It's a bondage to our likes and dislikes. It's the bondage to the passions and the desires. If we can be free from all of these, we can feel this sense of freedom. Gita has this other verse that I'm very fond of, that if we can learn to somehow withstand the pull of these passions, we can be considered yogis, yukta, but also sukhi naraha, will be happy people. So this spiritual life, it's not we're sacrificing and we're giving up all these enjoyable things. No, we're gaining so much more. We're giving up small things for the tremendous treasure, and so self-development really is what you're talking about. Is tremendously important. We will not realize God through a sharp intellect that can do this type of discrimination and the Sheaths and everything. We will not realize God through that. We realize God through the pure heart and the loving and kind heart, and the heart that's free from the pull of the passions, because passions make us selfish. It's free from selfishness. This is the essential thing. Everything else is helpful. It gives us conviction. It gives us a sense that these things are real. They're important. But this is more important. This is self-development. We don't find any of these great saintly people who were filled with these worldly desires. It's not the big difference between the pundits and these great saints. Huge difference. This is why Sri Ramakrishna, whenever he had a desire to meet any of these pundits, there were many great pundits during his day, Padmalochan and Vaishnav, many of them, he would send Hridoy. He would say, go and see if they have any viveka and vairagya, then I'll be happy to meet them. If they're just filled with pride, then I won't bother. That's all. So these are the essential things. Yes. Okay.
So, Swami,
yeah.
So what I heard, and
yes.
I was like,
yes.
So I totally appreciate what you were saying
yeah.
about us recognizing our own samsara. Maybe it'll bring it all home. So as a mother,
yes.
right, to what you what I'm hearing you say, with a deep rooted, how do we as parents recognize what is true sanskara versus we should be trying to, as a parent, right?
Yes.
I am definitely not Krishna to Arjun, but how do you as a parent navigate as you're bringing children into,
Yeah.
in the 9 and 6, as you know my girls?
Yes, yes. Yeah, I of course can't give any very definite type of answer, but I think we have to really try to recognize, is this really there some inherent personality trait that is a nice thing. Just not to force them in any direction. I know a lot of kids that the parents happen to be, they're scientists or this or that. They assume the kids will do that. And they're really trying to push them in that direction, and it won't work for the kids. So I think gently guide them so that they don't get off track, but also recognize their uniqueness and allow them to develop. Yeah, I like this idea, follow your dream. That certain kids, that they just have a different vision, and if they're not allowed to develop that, they'll be a little stilted and maybe have regrets at some time. But we don't let them do any and everything. Yeah, with kind of very soft kind of guidance, keep them, give them all possible options for and give them all good examples with values and everything, and then let them develop according to their own nature. When I was growing up, my mother used to say, parents give their children roots and wings. So we make sure that they're grounded, and then we give them their freedom to develop, just so it doesn't get too far off. So it's a very tricky thing. Yeah, and you have to analyze very carefully and try to see, is this just a fad of the moment or something, or is this really something that the child will really blossom if the child's allowed to go in this direction?
And I think back to Mahadevaji's question,
Yeah.
it's very easy to then subjugate your own I into that, right? So it's that balance
Yes.
of yourself.
Yeah, we have to be
Yeah,
careful.
we
Is
have to-
is it what the child wants or what the parent wants the child to
Exactly,
want?
right.
Yeah.
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 Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Swamiji,
Yes.
just I want to get you back to your expertise in connecting these 3 states. In Kundalini, they have the Sahasrara
Yes.
chakra where you're interconnected with the universe, or you're non-separate. In Samadhi also, we have a state of mind where we're we're in a state of union, or we're getting out of our body consciousness. And here in the concept of Anatmajnanananda
Yes.
is that we are in that blissful sheath or blissful state where we are, in and out of separateness. Basically we are. This becomes transparent, or you said translucent.
Yes.
We are back in touch with our true selves, our original selves, our original potential. Now, how do you compare these 3 states? The Sahasrara chakra, the Kundalini,
These are different models.
Samadhi of the,
Yeah, these are different.
and this-
Yeah. No, I understand. These are different models. If we want to try to connect the two together, then we can say Turiya state will be when the mind goes up to the Sahasrara. If you want to say that Savikalpa Samadhi, then it'll be the next lower state. But I don't think there's any need to really, we can look at them as 2 separate types of models, 2 different ways of understanding it. I don't think this idea of Kundalini will be able to explain the difference between dream and waking state. It can explain the different levels of spiritual experience, all in the waking state. How it functions in the dream state, that I can't say.
The other, this concentric rings
Yes.
concept of
Yes.
these five
Yes.
koshas. See, the more we analyze ourselves and become aware of ourselves and understand the layers in which we function, the idea is to dig deep inside to find out that we're blissful states, blissful beings, or we grow out of these things and connect with the outside, the ultimate union with God or universe or whatever? Are we digging deep inside ourselves and finding God, or are we getting out of these layers and breaking out and connecting with the ultimate?
Yeah, if we're talking about meditation especially, then we're diving deep. This was one of the emphasis of Sri Ramakrishna. You say, do now, there's many songs like that. You dive deep. That means to go beneath the mind level. The mind, the cognitive thinking mind. But we don't do that by giving up logical thought. That we first develop a conviction regarding the real nature of the self, and then whatever we find to be external to ourselves, we try to remove ourselves from that. So we'll get to this in the afternoon. This pratyahara. What we're really doing is withdrawing the mind from one by one the outer layers, of the onion, that way.
In and out. That point is no in and out. All are same. Right? Meaning inside or outside. That stage we become one. Meaning.
Yes.
So.
Yeah. No. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Once we dive deep to the bottom of the ocean, and we don't know anything about anything above or below, or we're immersed in that oneness. Yeah.
I don't have a burning question,
Okay.
but just a comment. I read sleep studies, and it's very amazing how the brain waves of a waking state are very similar to the dreaming state.
Yeah. I would think so.
It ties in with what you said.
Yes, because from a phenomenological point of view, experiential point of view, the waking state and the dream state are not really different. Only instead of things really coming from outside perceptually, but in terms of the mind's experience, we're experiencing things in the dream state the way we do in the waking state. Yeah, so it's not surprising to
in the
me.
deep state,
Yeah.
which is the slow wave sleep, it is different. The waves are very different.
Yes, that I can understand. Yeah, thank you.
So, Swamiji,
Yes.
thank you. You created a lot of ferment
Yes.
and questions for us to think about, and
Yes.
probably there'll be a lot of discussion during
Good.
lunch.
Yeah.
I'm sure, and then I'm sure you will have all the answers in the.
No, I
second
don't have all the
session.
answers. Yeah, I don't have
So
all the answers. Yeah.
I want to thank on behalf of all of you for Swamiji's very thought-provoking session this morning. Asato ma sadgamaya tamaso ma jyotirgamaya mrityor ma amritam gamaya. Om Shanti 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 Hari Om. O Lord, lead us from the unreal to the real. Lead us from darkness to light. Lead us from the finite to the infinite. Peace be unto us and unto all beings.